I've listened to my colleagues' comments with interest, and I join with Senator Feinstein in hoping that we can do something about this. But I do think we ought to keep this in perspective. What has happened in the last few days, what's happened in the last years, is of course tragic. And I'm not trying to perfectly equate these two, but we have a lot of drunk drivers in America that kill a lot of people. We ought to try to combat that too. But I think what many folks on my side of the aisle are saying is that the answer is not to get rid of all sober drivers. The answer is to concentrate on the problem. We have had a problem in this world for some time with both domestic and international terrorism. Many terrorists happen to be Muslims. When a Muslim jihadist blows up a school full of school children, we are often told not to condemn all of the actions of those of the Muslim faith because of the actions of a few. And I agree with that. So why doesn't the same rule apply to the 100 million plus gun owners in America who are exercising their constitutional right? And I think we ought to keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, as we talk about this issue.
Okay, sure, Senator Kennedy, that is a great analogy. Let's treat gun owners the way that we treat car drivers, meaning that we should require a certain number of hours of practice just to get a permit, which in and of itself has a number of restrictions. Then to get a full-blown license, you need to pass a written test and a practical test. The license needs to be kept up to date. The car that's being driven has to be registered. You have to pay to have it insured, which means paying insurance companies to underwrite you for the cost of damages you might inflict on other people or their property. I mean, hell, we have an entire agency and most police officers dedicated solely to regulating drivers. So if you want to regulate guns the way we regulate drunk drivers, you won't get any pushback here. I mean, think about it. Cars basically are the so-called worst case scenario for gun owners. They're completely regulated. There's pretty much no aspect of driving or car ownership that isn't regulated. And yet somehow, miraculously, cars are still here. Regulating cars wasn't some slippery slope to banning all cars. On the contrary, pretty much everyone has a car. It's almost like the right's slippery slope argument is just empty fear-mongering perpetuated by gun lobbyists who stand to benefit financially from having zero oversight on guns. Imagine that. And because cars are so regulated, if there's something about a car that's unsafe, the onus is on the car manufacturer to fix it. If a certain part of a road is unsafe, the onus is on the locality to fix that. If a stop sign or traffic light is needed, it's installed. And as a result, cars get safer, roads get safer, and intersections get safer. That is the entire point of regulation. It's not because the government is bored and looking for some way to spend its time and money. It's because certain aspects of society require oversight to keep people safe. And just like cars, I'd imagine that firearms, weapons that have resulted in mass shootings on a daily basis for years in this country, probably fall into that category. Consider too, the whole point of cars is transportation. The whole point of guns is to kill something. And yet cars are more regulated than guns? No one is saying, as Kennedy is suggesting, that all car owners should be punished because a few people drive drunk. We're saying that the regulations placed on car owners to not drive drunk prevent millions of accidents. Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you get fined, you could end up in jail. All of that is the result of regulation. It is the system working. But there's no reason why the infrastructure to regulate drivers should be greater than the infrastructure to regulate owners of a weapon whose sole purpose is to hurt or kill something. Notice too how Senator Kennedy's gut reaction here is to draw an equivalency, and a poor one at that, between gun use and drunk driving. Not to figure out how to fix this problem, but instead to deflect attention to a separate issue in an effort to suggest that guns aren't the problem here. In fact, we've been told by Republicans for years that gun control isn't the answer. And to that I'd say this: your way clearly isn't working. Who has the right to decide that gun control isn't the answer when their solution of more guns is leading to mass shootings every day? How many more people have to die before we recognize that pouring millions more firearms into society isn't the right move? How many more mass shootings? How many more movie theaters and schools have to be shot up? How many more nightclubs and churches and concerts? We have tried the Republicans' way of zero regulation and a proliferation of weapons of war into society for decades. It is a failure. And if you don't think it's a failure, I can point you to the families of 18 victims from just this week alone, and maybe they can change your mind. Kennedy even manages to bring up the talking point that many terrorists happen to be Muslims, and that we shouldn't demonize all Muslims for the actions of a few. First of all, leave it to a Republican to find a way to vilify Muslims at a hearing about gun control. Second, if he really wanted to be accurate about terrorism, he'd bring up the adherents from his own party, considering far-right terrorism is leagues more prevalent than Islamic terrorism. In fact, far-right groups are responsible for 2/3 of all terrorist plots and attacks in 2020. Not Muslims, white right-wingers. And finally, the last point is that when Kennedy says that a Muslim jihadist blows up a school, we shouldn't condemn the entire faith because of the actions of a few. He's right. But we do take steps to make schools safer. So by Kennedy's own logic, shouldn't we also take steps to tighten gun laws? Not to confiscate every gun in the country like Republicans are suggesting, but at a bare minimum require background checks and eliminate assault rifles? If schools were getting blown up left and right, we certainly would respond to the problem, so why not do the same thing for guns when mass shootings are occurring every single day? And look, I don't have to stand here and explain any of this to you. No one with half a brain would think that we're doing it right in this country. If Republicans, the purported pro-life party, actually cared about people surviving, they'd lift even a finger to fix a system that is so obviously broken. But whether it's the checks that the gun lobby cuts them for their re-election campaigns, or just their own entrenched partisanship on this issue, they won't change. So the Democrats should use their majority and pass reforms without them. We shouldn't have to wait for Republicans' permission to take steps to make this country safer. The GOP has already proven that there is no amount of deaths that will make them act. So at this point, we need to pass the Universal Background Checks Act. We need to close loopholes, we need to ban automatic rifles, and we need to restrict the use of high-capacity magazines. Republicans don't care if there's blood on their hands, but if Democrats do, then the time to act is right now. To see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification bell. And please subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I not only break down the biggest stories of the week, but I also interview major players in the world of politics, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Pete Buttigieg, Cory Booker, Jamie Raskin, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.